Welcome back to the Unique in You podcast, where we focus on the mind, body, and soul, and helping you to embrace your voice, your story, and your journey. If you're new here today, my name is Dr. Kyene Robinson, and I'm your host, and thanks for tuning in. So, in the last episode, we talked about imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is that internal voice that tells us that we're not qualified or we're not experienced enough. So, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch episode 3. But in today's episode, I want to talk about finding your voice. And this episode is for the person who ever had anything to say but didn't. This is for the person who felt uncomfortable speaking up. This is for the person who stayed quiet just to keep the peace. And this is for the person who told themselves that it's not that serious. So we're going to talk about finding your voice even when it feels uncomfortable, awkward, or scary. Stay tuned. So what do we mean when we say finding your voice? Finding your voice doesn't mean that you're loud. It doesn't always mean that you're saying the right thing. And it doesn't mean that you're fearless. I can think of several times where I had to speak up and I didn't feel comfortable or I was nervous in the situation. But when we say finding your voice, it means to stop pretending that what you think, know, and feel doesn't matter. It's not necessarily about speaking more, but it's about not silencing yourself. So, what does this look like? This looks like speaking up in meetings. I have an example that I'm going to share that I believe a lot of people can relate to, but it's also about saying no and not feeling guilty. It's about telling the truth about how you feel instead of trying to keep the peace. How many times have we went along with something just because we didn't want to wrestle somebody's feathers? How many times have we agreed to something just because we didn't want to cause an argument or a dispute? But this is about setting boundaries instead of over explaining. How many times have we had a long, drawn out explanation about something instead of just saying no? It doesn't always require all that, but it's about speaking up for ourselves. So next we're going to talk about why do we stay silent? And if we're all being honest, we stay silent because we don't want to be judged, we don't want to be misunderstood, we don't want to be rejected, and we don't want to be labeled as too much. So I have a funny short story or experience that I want to share where I was labeled as too much. I know, right? Can you believe it? And during this time, I was in undergrad and I was hanging out with a group of friends. And this one person, we're gonna call him an associate, turned to me and was like, "Can you just not be yourself today? Can you just be anybody else but yourself?" And I can laugh about it now, but back then, it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny at that time. And I can't remember the context of the situation or the scenario. I wish I could, but I can't remember the context. But I just remember in that moment, someone told me not to be myself. What if that happened to someone else? A lot of times we go through life experiences and our experiences affect how we show up now. But for somebody else, they could have received that message and that could have silenced their voice moving forward. They could have no longer spoke up for themselves or remained silent, no longer express how they feel, think, or what they know. In that experience, they could have learned that being quiet felt safer. But then also there are other people that have learned to stay silent even when it hurts. I want to share an example of how some people are raised not to speak up or talk back to their parents. And I was privileged enough, I'm going to use the word privilege, to be able to express how I feel growing up with my parents. As long as I was being respectful, I was able to express how I feel in the household. But not everyone was raised in that way. And if they were told something by their parents, they had to be silent and they had to accept it. But what happens when years of your life, 18 years of your life living with your parents, you've always been told to remain silent, to not express yourself, to not to speak up? That can have a long impact. And later in life, you may feel or think that what you think, feel, and know doesn't matter. And then you may have a hard time speaking up at your job. You may have a hard time expressing yourself in relationships. So we want to be careful and want to make sure that our voice is being heard as long as we're being respectful. But then also I want to talk about the people pleaser. Sometimes we learn early in life or even later in life that other people's needs or wants are more important than our own. And we want to make sure that we're being true advocates of ourselves and showing up in a positive way. So I want to share another example of finding your voice, but on a smaller scale. And I'm going to use my name. So I'm very aware that I have a very unique name that most people have never heard of. It's not common and it's often mispronounced. And to be honest, I've heard so many different variations of my name, and I don't always correct people when they mispronounce my name. I'll say comments like, oh, I know what they meant, or it's not a big deal, or I just don't want it to be an awkward situation. But what I'm saying when I say those things is that my name doesn't matter. And that's not the case. It's not about being disrespectful. It's not about being condescending, but it's about finding your voice and expressing or sharing the things that matter to you. And my name matters. So I'm going to take this as an opportunity to teach everyone or to inform everyone of the correct way to pronounce my name. So my name is Kai Yin. 2 syllables. First syllable is Kai. Second syllable is Yin. And when you put it together, you get Kai Yin. And that's it. So I want to share another example that most people can relate to, especially if you do not have a unique name. Have you ever been in a meeting and you know what the problem is? You know what needs to be said. You know what needs to be done. But instead of speaking up, you remain silent. You may have said comments as if, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. And you left the meeting without saying anything and later said to yourself, I should have said X, Y, and Z. Proverbs chapter 31, verse 8 and 9 talks about speaking up for others that cannot speak up for themselves. So initially, when you read this verse, you may think it's just talking about speaking up for others and not necessarily yourself. But you cannot speak up for others if you don't believe your own voice matters. And learning to speak up for yourself preps you to be able to speak up for others. And when this verse talks about helping those that can't speak up for themselves, it doesn't just mean that the person is nonverbal or can't verbally speak, but it's also referring to people that are helpless or hopeless. And once you have healed and acknowledge that your voice matters, you're able to step in and help those that have not yet found their voice. So next, we're going to talk about 5 practical ways that you can find your voice. Number 1, correct one small thing at a time. So you may not want to start off with something big, but something low risk. For example, for me, I started off with my name, correcting people when they mispronounce my name. And what that does is it helps to build your confidence, and so that you know it is a safe space for you to express how you feel. Number 2, pause before saying that it's fine. And what I mean by that, a lot of times our initial reaction is to dismiss our feelings. And a good example about this is, have you ever been to a restaurant and let's say the waitress got your order wrong and you ordered a steak, and when the waitress came back, they gave you a burger. And instead of saying or telling the waitress to correct your order, you say it's fine and you take it. Now, you know you've been thinking about that steak all day and you couldn't wait to eat it, but for whatever reason, you didn't feel like it mattered. You didn't want to have that awkward conversation, or you didn't want to feel uncomfortable, or you felt as though your needs didn't matter instead of speaking up for yourself. So instead of saying it's fine or dismissing something, pause, really think, is this something that's really important to you? Because if so, voice your opinion and get your steak. Number 3, use short, clear sentences. Not everything deserves or needs a long, drawn-out explanation. And no is a full sentence. For example, let's say someone asks you to do something that is going to drain you for the day. Instead of giving them a long, drawn out list of everything that you have outlined for that day, just say, I can't commit right now. You don't have to over explain yourself or apologize for anything that is not your fault. Number 4, practice out loud when you are alone. So let's say you're in that meeting and you had something that you wanted to say, but you didn't for whatever reason. And later that night, you thought, oh, I should have said X, Y, and Z. Practice what you would have said out loud. And that's going to help build that muscle memory so that next time you feel more comfortable speaking up. And then number 5, expect discomfort and do it anyway. It's going to be uncomfortable. Your voice may become shaky. You may start sweating, but that's okay. That's part of the process. So embrace it and do it anyway. So last but not least, we have the featured earring of the week. And these red heart earrings represent love. We are in the month of February. In February, we have Valentine's Day that symbolizes love. But in February is also heart awareness. So heart disease is one of the leading causes of death. And these featured earrings are a reminder for us to love ourselves, take care of our hearts, and wear something meaningful and cute. So if you're interested, please visit my website at www.theuniqueinyou.com to check out my earrings. You can also make a purchase on the website as well. And also, if something in this podcast or in this message resonated with you, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, embrace the unique in you.